In this lesson, we'll learn how to choose a suitable axis order in order to help prevent gimbal lock interpolations. If you've ever animated rotation and have run into twisting issues, that's simply due to the current axis order of the animated object. So the axis order is simply how Euler rotation is evaluated. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at where we can find and edit the axis order of an object. I'll go ahead and select the sword. We'll move over to our motion panel. So underneath our rotation list, we can go ahead and start to scroll down until we get to Euler parameters. So here we see the axis order. Now at the bottom here we see the rotation axis. This is simply our axis of interest. We can choose any axis to take a look at here. And as we start to choose between a different axis order in this list, right now going to have Y selected. Watch what happens, really basic. If I were to choose Y, ZX, that means that Y is going to be the first in this list. It's the axis of interest. All right, so it's just a way, again, to keep track of each axis. But what we're more concerned about is our axis order. So by default, it's set to XYZ. So let's go ahead and experiment with this by creating a good axis order for a sword swipe. We'll go ahead and go to our rotate manipulator. We'll make sure it's set to gimbal again to take a look at the true axis of this object. What we'll do is go ahead and rotate up in the x-axis, and as we do, we can see that no other axis is influenced because x is evaluated first. But watch what happens when we move in the y-axis. Now you can see that it starts to influence x because that gets evaluated next. And then from this, we know that z is going to drive the other axes. All right, so again, we're working on a sword swipe. I'm going to go ahead and undo back. Let's go ahead and tilt this over in the y-axis, and let's go ahead and start to now rotate in the z-axis. So with XYZ, it kind of takes us there, but you can see that we're at a bit of a weird angle as we start to rotate in what would be the swipe axis Y in this case. So this is probably not the best choice for us. So let's say we go ahead and try to find another axis order. Now, how do we find the best axis order? It's really just a matter of experimentation. Simply because you may decide on any number of these axis orders, and it really depends on what you're animating. I remember I was animating a character thinking, and I had to use an axis order I hadn't used before, but that helped me to prevent gimbal lock interpolations. So in this case, let's go ahead and choose the next choice, XZY. We won't go through all of these. We'll try XZY next, because I tend to work with that at times. And I also like to work with ZXY. I find that that works well in many cases. Now, before we go ahead and change this, let's go ahead and see what's going to happen when we change our axis order after we've added rotation. You can see that our object starts to shift because we're changing the way it rotates. All right, so the safest way would be to go back to the current axis order we were working with. Now we can go ahead and Alt right-click and choose Transform to 0 to bring it back. And then we can go in and choose a new axis order. So again, we're going to go ahead and work with the next choice, XZY. So from this, we know that when we move in X, nothing will change in the other two axes. But we know that when we move in Z, that's going to influence the X-axis. And here we see that that is not a good choice. We have no control over the swipe axis. So this would let us know during animation that we would run into gimbal lock issues instantly. All right, so that's not too good of a choice. Let's go ahead and bring this back with Transform to 0. And let's go ahead and work with ZXY. So from this, we know that when we move in X, Z will be influenced. Very neat. And now, if we were to, let's say, move in our Z-axis, notice we can align this in a way where we now have a really good swipe axis and X. Very neat. And then we can go ahead and tilt the sword over to the side in the Y-axis, and we still have a very nice swipe. So that's how we decide on a good axis order. What's going to work best for our situation. When it comes to rigging, if you wanted to, let's say, set up a twist rig without the use of the look at constraint that we learned in the previous lesson, if you wanted to link directly to the rotation of an object, you just want to make sure your axis order is robust enough to make sure that you won't run into any flipping issues in animation or in your deformations. Alright, so again, that's a look at how to choose a great axis order so that we can get the animations and the deformations that we'd like to see in our control rigs.